right about the underlying narrative.
I definitely think that he is right. And Martin, it's interesting that you mentioned this idea of a government takeover. What's really interesting about this, and part of the reason that the Affordable Care Act has been so complicated and difficult to administer, is that the people who were putting it together, including the White House, understood that the only way to get a big social change like this was to get buy-in from the vaunted middle class by saying we will not disrupt you. That essentially this is going to be change that will leave whatever we have mostly in place, even though what we really have doesn't really work. No. You have this employer-based healthcare system where if you lose your job or change jobs, your health care goes away because it was stuck to your employer. It's tied you to your employer in order to get this service. So I think what frightens Republicans really, and why they consider it a government takeover, is that for people who don't have insurance, the government offering subsidies or the government covering you by expanding Medicaid, to them, that is creating a new entitlement for people they despise, which are the working poor, the guy at McDonald's, the mom who's working at Walmart, taking care of her kids, that person who they feel doesn't...
People in this city who work 2 jobs to survive.
And three, and people who Republicans feel because of their own irresponsibility aren't rich and aren't well off. And so why should we, taxpayers who have insurance, people who have, why should we give them anything? And I think it gets to that fundamental question of a subsidy to people, to them, is welfare. And even the White House has been reluctant to talk about the Medicaid piece because they understand that's how politics is played in the U.S.
Professor Dyson, you preach often in churches. When you listen to this kind of rhetoric, as brilliantly elucidated by Joy, this rank contempt for anyone who might have a moderate income, what do you conclude?
Well, this is a repudiation of the very ethic of care, concern, and compassion that has been produced at the heart of Christianity and all great religions, not just Christianity. And here's the real tragedy here, that the people who claim to be defending the middle class are preventing people from an escalator into the middle class. Secondly, what they're trying to do here, as Joy has already talked about, is to really renounce what they feel to be ostensibly subsidies. But the reality is they don't want to transfer subsidies from, say, like AIG, which got $1 million payoffs on the American, at the American taxpayers' expense, and doled out all kinds of benefits and advantages.
Or Bank of America, or Goldman Sachs. When do you want to stop?
The list goes on and on. Don't call it a comeback. We've been here for years. But the reality is that they don't want those kind of subsidies to be handed over, even in small and minimal percentage, to those who deserve it the most. Welfare exists in this country. It's for the rich. It's for the wealthy. It's for the well-heeled. It's for the deeply entrenched. It's for the well-established. But those who are left to their own devices are those who are subject to the most vicious forms of, if you will, socialism for real, because they get cast out on the bounty of the American public common will, and that common will is drying up. There's an evaporation of compassion, and there's a deficit, not of trust, but of investment in those who are vulnerable. When I hear this, it's the gospel that stands against the great figure named Jesus who stood on behalf of the poor.